We are live with SCI TV. I'm Joshua Gordon, the founder of the Sports Conflict Institute, joined by my co-host Jordan Shillett. Jordan, welcome.
Hi, Josh. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jordan is the best dressed on the show today, but Coach Danny Mackey of Brooks Beast is a close second. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joshua and
So
Jordan.
thanks for joining us. I know you've just come back from altitude, so you're enjoying the fresh air and clean air in Seattle. But we're hoping you give us a little bit of background about how you got into coaching, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm probably assuming that wanted to coach from the get-go. So when I was 18 at the University of Illinois, I was more I was really into the methodology of why we were doing what we were doing, and so I would say it started then. I ran in a small Division I school at Eastern Illinois for a couple years, and then I got my degree in biology and business there. I double majored, and then I went to grad school at Colorado State. And then when I went to grad school out there, I was in exercise phys and biomechanics, and I was fortunate enough to coach for CSU for a couple years. I was a volunteer, but I was right at the tail end of Dell completely. So that was a pretty cool first experience. And then I ran for the Hansons for a very short amount of time. It was cool, but after that I taught in college for a bit and got a job at Nike in '06. And I was the whole time I was coaching, and I worked for Adidas and had some athletes on the side. And then in 2013 I got the job here with the Brooks Beasts. So currently I coach 12 Brooks Beast athletes, or like I said, about a little over 2 years into the team. And then I also coach Phoebe Wright, who's a Nike athlete, and Adidas, and Brie Felnagel, who's sponsored by Adidas. So I have 14 athletes total right now.
So, Danny,
Fantastic. So
how'd you
part of
decide?
what we're hoping for, sorry, Jordan. Part of what we're hoping for is to get your perspective on different coaching styles. Obviously, you're coaching a number of different athletes as part of the Brooks
Yeah.
Beat project. And so, just set the tone a little bit. What are some of the ways that you deal with all those different varieties of athletes and help them excel?
There's a couple different ways. So usually, I think just because of my background in science, I have a fairly strong appreciation towards it. But I also taught for like 4 years. So there's a little bit of this kind of melding back and forth where I let science be, or what I should say, what people have done before and what we kind of know, be the anchor, but very humanistic, I guess, with how I approach the athletes. So that's like a fairly big driver. The other driver I would say is it's athlete centered, but it's driven by the coach. And so that basically means, like in practice, it means that every decision I make is for their benefit performance wise. But it's got to be the accountability's got to be in my end for the preparation standpoint. You have to execute. So those are probably two things I think that drive how I coach. And then because of the circumstance I'm in now with the team, and this is one of the reasons why I was super excited to get the position, is it is very team focused. So we're not just the Beasts aren't just a training group. Even with Phoebe and Bree, like it's a team process. I think that's their benefit. So it's very synergistic in a way. So those are maybe the three drivers that I have. So it's science, athlete driven, or athlete centered, I should say, coach driven, and then a team approach.
So, Danny, how do you think that team approach is different with a professional group as opposed to a collegiate team?
Uh, it depends on where they came with the college. So I didn't go to a very big university. It was Division I, but it was small. But I thought that where I went to school at Eastern Illinois was how every college was, because I think this is how it is. So high school, everyone is in a team, right? You do everything together, you train together, the same workouts. I didn't know this, but for me, in college, same thing. Like we just trained together. We actually warmed up with the sprinters and throwers on our team. We're very close. Then when I started running post-collegiately, I started realizing that where I went to college was very unique. Um, and then all the athletes on my team, except maybe probably Kate Katie, they won nationals that one year. So they did everything together, but outside of that, most of them come from like a difference is we're trying to take those universities that you lose relational aspect of your job anymore. Try to like take those benefits and apply it to the pro world. I mean, there's some studies that talk about or show like just rats exercising individually in their cage and how their cortisol levels are higher than rats that are in this kind of community environment exercising. So I think you could just anyone who or run with your close friend for 45 minutes. Most people are going to want it with a friend. Applying it to a very like high level professional setting is the driver because I think that relational component is to them to do that. I mean, some athletes though that I've recruited, I'm very upfront with what we're trying to do here, and they would fit maybe better with just a coach and an athlete. That's their thing. They just want one-on-one. But there is a place for what we're doing here, and I think it's definitely one of the reasons why it's been successful in 2+ years.
So given the importance of the relationships and what you do, what are some of the things that you've set in place in terms of structures or upfront alignment work to ensure that those personal conflicts don't evolve and become a detractor or negative, and that in fact you're getting the benefit of the relationships, you're getting the benefit of the team dynamic?
Yeah, it's a constant. That's one of the. So there's a lot of work when you operate in this type of situation where it's team involved, and you just hit on it. There's definitely personal conflicts. I mean, I had one in year one. I want year one or two last year. I have one or two this year going on. So they're always there. I usually wait for trends, and so that means that like if I see something going on that could be some sort of a conflict starting, I let it play out a little bit before I intervene. The other strategy I use is I tend to, if I see something going on, I tend to address the whole team together. I don't necessarily call someone out, but I'll bring up the point of contention generally and say, hey, this is going on. Like let's say for example, I notice there's like communication problems and people are pushing the pace on recovery days, or they're gonna be going off on their own and doing their own thing. I'll just remind them and say, hey, one of the reasons why we're here is because you get these certain benefits from training with your teammates. If you need to do your own thing, it's better to communicate and let them know what's going on versus just doing it. Or here's the reason why we do our recovery days, and here's why we need to do them together. So it's just like positively reinforcing why we do the things that we do. If I don't see a change at that point, then I usually sit them down one-on-one and try to talk through why they're doing what they're doing, because typically they have a reason for it, and typically that reason is not like their perception is obviously their reality. So it's good for me to get a gauge on what's going on, because they're usually coming out from left field somewhere, but that's important for me to know where that's coming from. If it's something that is within the team, which is more normal, I try to like get some of the older athletes take on what's going on, the ones that I have trusted relationship with, and let them manage it. That I didn't have the first 2 years. This year I'm kind of being able to have, because usually you don't have the little conflicts you have with an older athlete, or that I might have, are very easily addressed with just me talking to them, or them talking to me, because I try to have an open door policy, so they are comfortable enough to know that if they have a problem with maybe something I said or did, or they're nervous or anxious about a workout, or nervous or anxious about the plan moving forward, from day one I try to instill this calmness with them and say, you need to talk to me because this is built on trust, and so if you don't like something, I'd rather know why or why not. So they have a couple years. Like I've been coaching Katie this is the 4th year. I've been coaching Bree for 3. Or someone like Garrett Heath who comes on, that's just a rock solid guy. He's coached before. He's 29. Like right away, we had a really good. So those are the athletes I might rely on to kind of help manage the things within the team. So that keeps me maybe objective and keeps me as like a point of reason if they need to reach outside the team. But for the most part, we've had very like small manageable problems. But you got to get to them early. You can't let them fester. I'll even sit athletes down if it's between two of them. I'll sit down and have them talk to each other, and then like let me know how it went, and if I need to mediate another one that I do. But yeah, that tends to be the approach that's worked thus far. I mean, a lot of it helps in the front end if I'm really transparent with them. It's caused me maybe not to get some athletes that would be good fits here because I might have scared them off, but I try to be, here's how it is, here's like the good things about the group, here's things we're trying to work on, here's how I communicate, here's the agreement. And so sometimes just reminding them, being like, hey, remember when you signed the contract, like, this is what we talked about. It might not be really convenient right now, but this is what we got to hold to these principles. And so they tend to be really good about that stuff, that type of response. If you're treat them like adults like they are and be really respectful with the approach, things don't tend to get become huge problems.
So what type of athlete do you think is like the ideal fit for the Brooks Beasts? Like, I know you guys have a really close relationship with Brooks, and all the athletes give feedback to headquarters, and like what type of athlete are you looking for when you're recruiting from the collegiate level?
I mean, it's not a particular. If you were to talk to the 14 athletes that train with us, they're all over the map in terms of personalities, I think. So I don't really look for. I guess I do look for a certain type. I mean, there's a few just like indicators that I would look for. One is like how serious they are, because we tend to have not take ourselves super seriously, but our approach is very serious. I mean, we have high-level people that support the group, and the goals are, as high as they get in the sport. And so, just trying to get a gauge on why they want to run, what's their driver. If it's to be, the best athlete to their maximum potential, then that's a good starting spot. The other is I look for how adaptable they are. So I have a few athletes like Matt Hillebrand, for example. Like, he went to Kentucky, he had 3 coaches in 4 years. That was like a plus for me, because that means that he's able to come into a program, adapt to it, and just move forward. And as a pro, that's a huge perk, because even if my system and style is the same as they did in college, there's so many variables you don't control anymore. Like, travel's kind of crazy sometimes in Europe. Getting into meets is political at times, and they might not have any control of it. Dealing with an agent, money's being involved, and so there's that adaptability is such a huge indicator for how much they can evolve and get better. And then I look for like how their relationships were with their teammates and coach. Was it positive? Like, how do they talk about their teammates and coach? How do they approach them? How did they resolve like any issues they had, and what was the outcome of it? So those things are pretty like, they're not what's your mile PR. I mean, we look for it because the front end has said how serious they want to be. I mean, this is assuming that they've done really well in the NCAA system, but they have those 3 things, then they're going to be really happy and really successful here.
So when you think about coaching styles in particular, do you see yourself as having one particular style, or do you find that you're really trying to have multiple styles depending on the athlete? What better characterizes your take on what works well for you?
Yeah, I think I mean, if I expect my athletes to be really adaptable, then I have to too. If you were to see how I just got back from practice now, like how I talk to Dorian Ullery versus how I talk to Brie Felnago versus how I talk to Angela Bizzari, like, it's different. My outcome and goal for them is the same, but just my communication style is a little bit different with them. Like, how much do I communicate? How direct can I be with them? Like, how much do I have to start off with something positive and then get to the point of like what I'm trying to learn from the conversation? But maybe I don't think that really affects my overall style. I think that it's maybe like detailed things, but I don't really know like how I would like what kind of adjective I would use for my style. I communicate a lot with them. Very particular about like day-to-day activities. I think that if I can go through a certain set of questions with all 12 to 14 of them every day, I have an idea of like how they're feeling, where their energy levels are, like where their anxiety level is, and so yeah, it's very communicative. And I like to be, I guess, the gatekeeper. So that's probably part of my style, where I do their weight training as well as the stuff they're doing on the track. I think that's how, for me, that's how it should be. And then everything that comes in from the science side of things, we have a really good medical staff that helps the team. But I have a fairly good understanding of like chiropractic and physio care, so that helps me work with the team doctor really well. So I communicate with, in health and rehab. Those are the two clinics here that help us a lot. Same thing with Brooks. Like, it's very transparent. So maybe that's where it would be transparent. So yeah, I don't know. Like what adjective I would use. I mean, it seems like most good coaches that I admire are kind of they wear multiple hats, I think. I don't know if that's a good answer, but yeah.
I mean, I guess building off of that, do you like micromanaging some things and leaving some things independent, or do you want like most of the weekly routine to be micromanaged?
No, it's funny because I was just talking about that with Bree Feldnagel. So just because of the budget circumstances of the team, like when we go to altitude camps, I actually stay in the house with athletes, which that's a pretty weird work environment if you think about it. And so, I mean, it's a massive house. We have our own space, but I see things going on there that like I wouldn't eat that, or they should be going to bed earlier, or but I don't micromanage that. So Bree was giving me a hard time because one of her teammates, Megan, asked me a question about like life choices, and she goes, "Don't you know Danny doesn't micromanage those things? He's going to tell you to figure it out, And so that's how I am. Like I want them to tell me, like, if they missed a run because, let's say, we're traveling and they're in a different country and like they just missed it because they made a stupid choice. I'd rather know that because then I can help plan for it. So it's like this. It's not micromanaging. It's just I just kind of want to be the gatekeeper. I want to make sure that I'm helping them, prepare as best as possible. Where the micromanaging comes on is if you take the life choices out of it, it's like from a training standpoint. So we have a very specific reason for everything we do, from weight training to physio work to our stretches to our drills. I'm very particular about form. Very particular on rest days, making sure that we're hitting the right paces and tempos. So that's micromanaged, but within that, there's a lot of flexibility. Like yesterday, Dorian was going a little faster than was on the paper for the workout, but he felt good, and I'm looking at it like, well, he needs some confidence. This guy's been injured for 5 years, and so what's this going to do for him to just have a great workout? So if you guys are standing there watching, you'd be like, well, Danny said run 2:45 for Ks, Dorian's running 2:37. He's not saying anything. Whereas Friday, I might be like, Dorian, do not go a second faster. So it's kind of this. There's sometimes it's micromanaged, or sometimes I just kind of let it go. And I think that's an important thing that I've just learned over the past couple of years, because if you come from a science background, you want to make things very black and white, but just spending time in science, I learned there's a lot of gray area. It's kind of the point of science. Like, you don't really, you have like background for the answers and outcomes that you do, but it's not necessarily like there's a right way, or there's one right way. There's a lot of right ways, but there's definitely some wrong ways, and that's now a little bit more how I coach, and that's important if there's a good trust for the athletes, and I've kind of taught them, here's what the goal is, here's what we're trying to do, and then they can work within the system and make the best choices, and I just help them along the way. So there's a little back and forth in the micromanaging and not. Life choices, I stay out of that until they ask me. They're adults. I want them to be happy, and so I don't want to feel like them like big brother's watching, because I'm around them a lot. That's the last thing I want to. And the few coaching styles that I've noticed that are like that, those athletes don't tend to be very happy, and they don't tend to do well. So I kind of maybe live in both worlds, depending on what's best, I think, at that time.
Yeah, it's funny. I was trying to envision when you're talking about the, off-season training where you're up at altitude and you're all living together. I was trying to imagine the Seahawks and having Pete Carroll, Russ Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, and Richard Sherman living together for a few weeks, and what that might be like.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I will look forward to the day when the budget grows where I'm maybe not doing that. But it's also a little weird too because Katie's, my wife, and so I don't want to pull her from that team environment. I mean, there's ways to get around it. Like, I'm gone all day working anyways, so go to practice and gone. I come back to the house around dinner. And there's a couple older athletes too who, like if I use Dorian again as an example, like him and I were friends before I started working with him. And Nick Simmons, I've known Nick for 7 years. So they help balance things out, but it is unique. The social dynamics of it are unique for sure.
Great. So as we wrap up the episode, any final thoughts about coaching styles or any of these topics we've touched on already? And then also, if you could leave us with ways that folks can follow you and your team on the internet or through Twitter or whatever else we can do to keep up on your progress.
Yeah, so I guess, you guys asked a lot of good questions. So I don't really have further, I have a lot of thoughts on coaching, but it could go for a while. A good way to follow me, though, and maybe ask me more questions if you have them, is on my Twitter handle. It's at DTMack, so DTMACK. And then I also have Instagram, though there's not tons on there minus pictures, but there's some commentary. It's Danny T. Mackey. And on both those, usually it's running related. It's maybe some of my opinions on some of the political sides of the sport. Sometimes I put up 2-week training blocks with athletes. I'll start doing that here as I start racing. So yeah, I try to be as transparent as possible, and I think it's a good way to figure out what's going on. And for the Beasts, it's at BeastsTC. They have a Twitter handle as well. And Brooks Running has some bios of the athletes, but those are probably the 3 best spots to go to get information on what's going on with the team and the athletes and myself.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time today to share some of your thoughts and experiences. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks a lot,